Remember, remember, the 5th of November, the Gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the Gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Hey guys, in today's episode we're going to talk about one of the most famous figures in British history, Guy Fawkes. So stay tuned, sit back and relax, as we aim to find out if he is the hero he is believed by so many to be, or nothing more than a malevolent individual that was trying to commit mass murder. For some 400 years, not many people outside of England had ever heard of the story of Guy Fawkes and the Gunpowder Plot. That is, up until 2005, with the release of the now cult classic film V for Vendetta, which drew certain parallels to the life of Guy Fawkes. Then, in 2008, the hacktivist group Anonymous would wear masks in his likeness, inspiring people to take to the streets in protest. It needs to be made clear that Guy Fawkes was in no way a superhero, and nor was he the face of democracy as so many people have come to believe. I'm sure most of you would disagree with me, but hear me out. The part in history in which he played was more the role of the villain in this tale. To know who Guy Fawkes was, it is first better to get a fundamental understanding of the time in which he lived. In England, during the time of Guy Fawkes, it was an oligarchy. That is to say that it was run by a king and not an elected governing body as we have become accustomed to today. He lived in possibly one of the most religiously intolerant and repressive times in human history, during that of the Spanish Inquisition. In its 350-year reign, it is said to have been responsible for the deaths of some 30,000 to 300,000 people. In short, this was primarily set up to identify heretics from Judaism, Protestant and Islamic faiths, and convert them to Catholicism. Any unwilling to do so would be either executed or exiled. And Guy Fawkes was a devout Catholic. With that being said, let's move on to Guy Fawkes the man. Guy Fawkes was born on the 13th of April 1570 in Stonegate, York. There exists still, to this day, a small pub situated in the city centre called the Guy Fawkes Inn, that claims to be his birthplace. He was the eldest of 4 children. His parents, Edward and Edith Fawkes, appear to have been strict Catholics, with his father being a proctor and advocate of the consistory court in York. When Guy Fawkes was just 9 years old, his father passed away, and his mother would go on to remarry several years later to a man named Dennis Bainbridge of Harrogate. Fawkes would eventually go on to study at St Peter's School in York, where upon leaving he decided to sell his father's family estate and begin his military career. By 1591 he had travelled to mainland Europe to fight in the 80-year War for the Spanish. He would also fight in the Netherlands during the popular Protestant uprising, a campaign that did not go well for the Catholic faith. Having proven himself at the Siege of Calais in France in 1596, it was clear that he was more than a competent soldier, even being recommended for a captaincy. Not surprising considering he was noted to have been highly intelligent in matters of war. Physically, he was described as being a tall, powerfully built man with auburn hair and a large moustache. What happened next would set in motion events that almost brought England to its knees. On the 24th of March, 1603, the then Queen Elizabeth died, leaving no heirs. It was decided that her closest living relative, James VI of Scotland, would be crowned King of England. He was a son of Mary, Queen of Scots, who was not only cousin to Queen Elizabeth, but had been executed on her orders for treason in 1587. So James VI became ruler of Scotland, Ireland and Great Britain, and was recrowned James I. There was, however, one big problem for Guy Fawkes. Unlike Queen Elizabeth, the new king was a Protestant, and he would rather have people loyal to the Church of England and himself rather than that of the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church. Queen Elizabeth did not mind Catholics. In fact, she felt that as long as Catholics behaved themselves, were loyal to her, and attended church now and then, they were free to believe whatever they wished. James I, however, wanted to expel the Papist sect out of England. This enraged Fawkes, who later denounced Scotland and referred to the new King of England as nothing more than a heretic. Towards the end of that year, Fawkes had travelled to Spain to seek the support of a Catholic rebellion in the UK. He had approached Philip III, but despite being sympathetic and welcoming to Fawkes, he did not offer any support. Perhaps the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, which was an attempt by Philip's father to overthrow Queen Elizabeth and reinstate Catholicism, was still fresh in their memory. Fast forward to 1604, and Fawkes had met a like-minded individual called Robert Catesby, a fellow Catholic who wanted to remove the new Protestant King James from the throne just as much as Fawkes did. Catesby, as history would record it, became the mastermind behind the Gunpowder plot. So on May the 20th, 1604, at an inn called the Duck and Drake in London, the 5 main conspirators of what would become known as the Gunpowder plot were to meet for the first time in secret. They were Robert Catesby, Thomas Winter, Thomas Percy, John Wright, and of course Guy Fawkes himself. They would concoct an ingenious plan to blow up the House of Lords in an attempt to kill King James and the aristocracy at the opening of Parliament. After this meeting, the conspirators left London and went back to their homes, eventually returning in October of that same year. It was here that they picked up another conspirator by the name of Robert Keyes. He was responsible for Catesby's house in Lambeth, where they would store the gunpowder and other supplies. Parliament announced on December the 24th that due to fears of plague, they would not reopen in February 1605, but instead they would reopen on October the 3rd. It is believed that during this period, between October and the end of December 1604, the conspirators had spent their time tunnelling towards the House of Lords. This plan, however, was cut short, where upon hearing a noise from above, it turned out to be a widowed woman clearing out the undercroft beneath the House of Lords. It's worth noting that despite many searches, no tunnels have ever been discovered to this day. Also in December, 3 more conspirators were told of the plot: Ambrose Rookwood, Sir Everard Digby, and Thomas Bates. Rookwood and Digby seem to have been brought in as financial backers, and Bates as he was simply Catesby's long-time servant. By March 25th, 1605, the conspirators managed to purchase a lease to the undercroft owned by John Wynyard. It's worth mentioning that on that day, 4 more members of the Gunpowder plot had joined the ranks. They were Robert Winter, John Grant, Christopher Wright, and finally, the most reluctant of the conspirators, John Tresham. On the 20th of July that year, barrels of gunpowder were to be placed in the undercroft directly beneath the House of Lords. Then once again on July the 28th, the threat of plague threatened London, so Parliament came to the decision that they would not reopen until Tuesday the 5th of November. There was nothing that the conspirators could do except wait, and by the end of August it turned out that some of the gunpowder that had been stored in the undercroft had started to decay. Some more was brought in and again hidden with firewood. There now stood 36 barrels of gunpowder. To give you an idea of how much that was, estimates suggest it was about 1,000 kilos, or about 2,200 pounds. There was an experiment conducted not so long ago, where a mock representation of the House of Lords was built, and 36 barrels of gunpowder were placed and then detonated. It's safe to say that had Guy Fawkes been able to set off the detonation, then all within the building on November the 5th would have died. With the date of the attack set for November the 5th, it was decided that Guy Fawkes would be the one left behind to light the fuse and escape across the River Thames. As fate would have it, an anonymous letter that was sent to William Parker, the 4th Baron Monteagle, was later turned over to Cecil, the then Earl of Salisbury, who on the 1st of November showed it to King James. It is widely believed that Francis Tresham, the most reluctant of the co-conspirators, had written this letter, although he denied it. According to King James's own account, the first search of the buildings in and around Parliament was not made until November the 4th, whereupon in the undercroft, directly beneath the House of Lords, they came across a servant and a large amount of firewood. They questioned the servant, who said that the firewood had belonged to his master, Thomas Percy. That servant was Guy Fawkes. The search party left and reported their findings to the king, who insisted that a more thorough search was to be conducted. So later that night, when the search party, this time led by Thomas Knevet, returned and again found the servant, this time dressed in a cloak, a hat, while wearing boots with spurs. They immediately arrested him, and when asked his name, he gave it as John Johnson. After being searched, they found a small pocket watch and several matches. A further search of the undercroft revealed 36 barrels of gunpowder that were hidden by a large quantity of firewood and coal. While under interrogation, Guy Fawkes gave his name as John Johnson, and he would only reveal his mother's name and that he was from Yorkshire. The investigation discovered a letter addressed to Guy Fawkes, but he insisted that that was one of his aliases. He had made his intentions perfectly clear during the interrogation, that it had been his purpose to destroy the king and Parliament. It is said that he impressed the king so much with his unwillingness to yield that the king described him as possessing Roman resolution. Despite this praise, the king ordered that Johnson was to be tortured. It was under torture that Johnson finally broke and revealed his true name and those of his co-conspirators, including Rookwood. On November the 6th, Lord Chief Justice Sir John Popham questioned Rookwood's servants and managed to learn the names of several other co-conspirators. Catesby and Percy were killed in a shootout before they could face justice, leaving the remaining conspirators to be hung, drawn and quartered. Then, on the 31st of January 1606, Guy Fawkes committed suicide. I say this because he was not executed. It is said that when facing the gallows, Guy Fawkes managed to jump and break his neck, thus avoiding the alternative of being hung, drawn and quartered. In the end, the heads of all the conspirators were taken and placed on spikes outside the House of Lords as a warning to any who would ever again dare challenge the king's rule. In January of 1606, Parliament opened for the first time since the plot and passed an act which made services and sermons that commemorated the event an annual celebration of King James's escape from assassination. This act remained in force until 1859. In the immediate aftermath of the Gunpowder Plot, restrictions against Catholics were brought into effect, and these themselves would not be lifted for another 200 years. In later years it became custom in England to create effigies of Guy Fawkes to burn on bonfires and to set off fireworks, a celebration that is still going to this day. There is a long-running joke in England that the last man to enter the Houses of Parliament with honest intentions was Guy Fawkes. With that being said, it seems that in the last 400 years everything that Guy Fawkes stood for at the time has been lost. And perhaps that's a good thing. According to the history books, he wasn't doing this for democracy or for the greater good. He was doing it simply for his own radical religious beliefs. So in conclusion, the part he played in history is that of the villain. Despite what he has come to symbolise in modern society, becoming the face of those wanting to be free of persecution and oppression, it seems that if the history books are to be believed, then nothing could be further from the truth. But tell me, what are your thoughts? Do you believe he was the antagonist or the protagonist in this tale? Let me know in the comment section down below, and please feel free to like and share this video, and even subscribe to my channel. If you do so, don't forget to hit that little bell icon so that you will be notified when I upload more new and interesting content. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to sit and watch this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.